34 minutes past the hour. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. Our next guest comes to us from the great state of Washington, the state, not D.C. He is, of course, a great musician, a great activist, and a great journalist, where tonight he is with the esteemed governor of Washington State, Jay Inslee, some think maybe even a presidential candidate, talking about net neutrality. Our great go-to Pacific Northwest person is moving on up, as the Jeffersons would say. Mark, pleasure to talk to you, sir.
Hey.
I'm glad you were on the stage with the esteemed governor and others. Welcome to the broadcast. Happy Tuesday, man.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And thanks to everybody for checking out the Jeff Santos Show, the best progressive talk show in the United States. You're in the right place. And it's really great to hear you talk about the other Washington. That's how we refer to our state. But,
that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm actually going to be at KEXP. It's happening right now, actually. And the Governor Jay Inslee is here to talk about the importance of an open internet to free and open dialogue and democracy in society. So I'm actually here to ask some questions about democracy and the fact that, the United States is ranked 45th in the world, according to Reporters Without Borders, on their 2018 World Press Freedom Index. And we've had a steady decline in our ranking in terms of press freedom, according to that international advocacy group for journalism. And unfortunately, most of our elected officials and most of our media, Jeff, just are not educated and do not know this. I know I've talked to on the air on another program. I talked to Ro Khanna about this, but there are a lot of folks who in our own Congress and in our state houses and in the governor's office who don't know that the United States is ranked that low on the World Press Freedom Index. So normally the reaction I get is, I had no idea, will you please brief my staff? That's always the reaction I get. That's what I get from members of Congress and other folks. Then I think we have to take responsibility in the media, and those of us who are journalists and editors and publishers, we need to do much better at getting the word out on these kinds of issues. So, it was a step forward when the Boston Globe recruited around 400 news publications around the country, news organizations, to do editorials on the importance of press freedom and to talk about the Trump administration's bad attitude in that respect. And you can bet that in 2019 we will slip some more. I will predict it right now on your show, and I know it's going to happen because I'm constantly monitoring the Committee to Protect Journalists and the Reporters Without Borders group. There's also a group called Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, and these are all organizations that are on this.
Let me ask you about this, because this obviously is an issue. We brought it up with our good friend Larry Korb, the Center for American Progress, on the foreign policy side, but this is a media issue as well, and that is, of course, the journalist that was kidnapped in the Saudi embassy looking for a marriage license in Istanbul, Turkey, and to me, this is not getting enough attention. I'll give CNN credit. Yesterday morning when I saw the story, they had on the editor of the Washington Post's foreign desk, and she's quite emotional about the whole thing, of course. But I haven't seen a follow up. I didn't see MSNBC do anything on it. They're supposedly the more progressive TV network. Of course, we're not going to get anything from the FOX network, but that goes without saying. But how concerned are you about, sort of an issue like this, sort of getting very little coverage? Now, I don't know what the Boston Globe, I looked at it today. I didn't see much of it, but it might be inside page 4 or 5. But I'm concerned that this is an issue that we should do, because this obviously has impact on our foreign policy. Saudi Arabia is a country that is destroying Yemen. You talk about Ro Khanna, who's going to be on our TV show this upcoming weekend, is with Elizabeth Warren talking about this issue. But to me, this is something that goes right to what you do on a daily basis, is talk about the protections for journalists. Mark?
Well, I am executive director of Democracy Watch News, and as part of my job, I'm editor for Press Freedom, which means, and unfortunately I had to explain to one of the senior editors at The Nation, who I met with here on Bainbridge Island here in Puget Sound a couple of months or so ago. I had to explain what that actually means, because the editor just didn't understand what you would do if that was your job, as to cover press freedom. I say, well, there's so much to do, and there's so much that's not being done. I'm looking at data and research right now on the Committee to Protect Journalists website, cpj.org. 43 journalists have been killed globally in 2018. 262 were imprisoned last year, and there are 60 currently missing globally. So this is what we have to deal with every day if you are in an international news organization like Democracy Watch News. The Reporters Without Borders lists 10 citizen journalists killed in 2018. So it's dangerous in a lot of countries around the world, Jeff, and unfortunately these are the issues that the U.S. media doesn't cover. There doesn't seem to be anybody specializing in this issue except for me and a couple other people I could count on one hand. And so it seems like, it's just an area that the United States has fallen down on the job on. We just haven't kept up on what's happening in the rest of the world, number one. I mean, there's also a huge upheaval going on in Brazil, by the way. Talk about, neo-fascist candidates and all sorts of shenanigans going on down there. I have someone I'm very close to who's from Sao Paulo, and, she was telling me all about it and just, how Brazilians are really organizing themselves right now, just like a lot of them, people in North America and the United States of America are, because of a real right-wing kind of movement down there in the executive branch. But no, I just think it's an issue that nobody really talks about, unfortunately. I'm one of the lone voices out there. I keep talking about it. And like I said, every time I brief a member of Congress or someone in a position of power where you would think that they would be briefed on this, they just don't seem to know anything about it. Now, it's not because Reporters Without Borders and the Committee to Protect Journalists and RCFP haven't been working as hard as they can, but we're all on limited budgets. We're all working in nonprofits or not-for-profits where there's not, huge budgets to get the word out, and it's hard to keep up on the information because a lot of this information is impossible to get. I mean, when the journalists are being kidnapped and killed in other countries, it's very difficult to get the information out. We did have some journalists I know of that were covering the revolution in Gambia, that democratic revolution where they had to replace their dictator. And, some of those reporters and activists were in exile in Senegal because it's the only place where they felt safe. And so, it's an issue, and I will continue to talk about it on your show or wherever anyone else gives me a platform because it's just not being reported. And I will continue to brief my own colleagues in the media about it. So hopefully at some point there will start to be consistent reports from the major media on this issue and on what's been happening for years, but which just gets swept under the rug. And I think a lot of people in the United States, Jeff, are just under the impression that, as long as everything's going well in the United States in terms of press freedom, then we don't have to worry about the rest of the world. But we're all in this together. And if one reporter is being kidnapped or tortured or something in another country, then reporters here have to stand up and speak out about it. It's just our obligation as journalists ourselves.
Well, there's no doubt. And again, what's happening today in the Turkey situation, and we when we have Washington Post or New York Times or the smallest paper in America having people work for them overseas and in dangerous war zones like the Middle East, we can't just sort of keep this thing as a quiet. Just like we can't have students in Israel who are, basically being detained by the Netanyahu government. It's the same scenario, whether you're a student or whether you're an activist or whether you're a journalist. The protections of human rights are exactly why, I gave a bunch of time and whatever few shillings I could muster together to folks like Amnesty International and so forth, because this is what we need to do to protect our world and America at the same time. I want to get to net neutrality because this is an issue, too, that I think a lot of people don't know about. And I think also it connects the dots to what I do in radio and and many journalists do as well, and that is the protection of community and local radio and community television. We're going to have somebody on to talk about that in the next couple of weeks on the TV as well as on the radio side. And here's the other part of this. In my view, what happened in the 80s with Ronald Reagan opening the door to own multiple radio and TV stations that gave us the Murdochs in certain parts of the country. It was at that point in newspapers and TV and radio, you could do all of them, including the Boston Herald, where Murdoch owned it for a while, as well as one of the TV stations and so forth. Now you have multiple radio stations, all thanks to Clinton and the Republican Congress in the mid-90s, where you could own, I think, up to 7 stations, radio stations in the same market as well. So this, to me, when you talk about net neutrality, we need to really explain to the average person what that means. What it means when you go to your browser and go to a different website, and Google is telling you what to do here and there. I think it's really important that people break this down and understand. And people come home from a 9-to-5 job and they want to relax, and whether they put on the television or they go to the computer, because a lot of people have cut the cord, the net neutrality falls right into their nighttime pastime. Your views on this?
Well, I would like to thank the Washington State Council of Firefighters for helping sponsor the event tonight at KEXP. And the panel is pretty substantial. I'm actually there as a journalist to ask questions of these people, but Governor Jay Inslee is there, who we talked about maybe a potential candidate for United States president in 2020. But also some really great folks like Representative Drew Hansen, who served on the House on the Washington State House of Representatives, been there since 2011. He chairs the House Higher Education Committee. Justin Farrell is the senior vice president of Civic Ventures. Bradley Walkinshaw is the CEO of Grist. The KEXP, DJ Gabrielle Teodoros. A lot of really great people. Sarah Bird are on this panel tonight, and I think what they're talking about is really, really important, because the industry that I'm in and the music industry too that I work in is all about open access to information and open access to creative talent and creative content. So we're all out here, struggling to get the word out, and the more restrictions there are on the internet, the harder it's going to be. And so this actually tonight is partly a celebration of the creativity and innovation of an open internet, but there will also be discussions of some topics that are bad trends, including what you were talking about, corporate media consolidation, which I can mention in a second. But also, we do have an issue here. I'd like to give a shout out to Job Parrish and Maria Tomczyk with the program Mind Over Matters, because unfortunately KEXP has decided to drop them from their programming, and it's really a shame, because it's one of the best journalism projects, information shows in the country. It's on every Saturday morning on KEXP, and I've listened to it for years. And Job Parrish is a good friend of mine. He's kind of a mentor. Told me, you got to take over my work, because I'm doing other things now. And he's always been a good inspiration. But it's a very in-depth, very progressive, left of center kind of program that really gets into detail about local issues and national issues. And so I'm really sad to see that go. And I know there's going to be some discussion tonight of that as well. And I'm sure that the KEXP moderator and folks involved in this event know that they're going to get some questions about that as well. But I just want to go on record as really supporting Job Parrish. He used to write for the Seattle Weekly as well. He's a great writer. I just want to thank him and Maria for all the great effort that they put into that show, and hope that it continues in some form somewhere. And I hope maybe somebody picks them up or they syndicate or something, because it's a great show.
Well, hopefully, more and more progressive shows are out there that are needed, and particularly those that come from the world of print. You give them, a radio or a TV connection, and that I think is really important. Of course, they have to communicate, but it seems like this guy knows what he's doing. Let me ask you this: do you sense that? Whether we're talking about people in the legal community, people in the political community, that they understand, what it would mean if the world of Google and others, control everything in net neutrality? I mean, do they get the connection, or is it sort of still a kind of a foreign thing? It's like, it doesn't affect me.
It's another one of those issues, just like the press freedom issues that, once again, my colleagues in the media are not very well versed on and not very well informed. So, unfortunately, it's an uphill battle. A lot of people don't understand it. I know in Europe, and also in press freedom, I have to say that, and I definitely have some criticism for some of their policies too, but the European Parliament has been way ahead on these issues. That's why I was able to participate in a European Parliament conference on press freedom last year. But in the United States, we're lagging also on this issue of net neutrality. Now, the European Parliament has already adopted all sorts of measures to protect net neutrality, and it's a major issue at a lot of conferences. I think it keeps slipping under the rug. There have been a few town hall meetings and conferences here in Seattle at Town Hall on the issue that have been very effective, and I think more of that will help. And I have to say, even though we've talked about Maria Cantwell facing challenges in the U.S. Senate from Washington State, she, I have to say, on this issue of net neutrality, has been on the forefront and stepped right out in the Senate and spoke openly about the importance of it and helped try to educate the rest of the members of Congress on this issue. So in Washington, I think we're on it, but in the rest of the country, not so much. There is a group called Free Press, which is freepress.net, and they've been on this issue for years, back when the FCC actually had some hearings in Seattle about corporate media consolidation. And I was part of a group that visited Jim McDermott's office on this issue. So our progressive Congress members have been pretty good on it. But the FCC, since Michael Powell was the chairman, and, that's Colin Powell's brother, but when Bush was president, he was appointed chairman of the FCC. And ever since that happened, the Republicans have pretty much reigned on that commission. So they're all about corporate media monopolies. They're totally fine with it, And so they've been encouraging that, or at least going along with their corporate lobbyists on that issue. And unfortunately, small public and community broadcast stations have really suffered. There are some low-powered licenses that they've allowed. I know in Portland they have X-Ray.FM, which is their attempt to replace some of the progressive media that was taken off the air by Clear Channel and CBS and others. So, in general, though, I have been very critical of the FCC, and I did testify at the hearing before the FCC. Now, Commissioners Cops and Adelstein were Democrats, and they were very receptive and actually were trying to increase the transparency and openness of those hearings. But I have to tell you, Jeff, I may have told you the story before. It was kind of like, I literally went up to the commission and I had these reports in my hand and literally said, these reports show that corporate media consolidation and monopolization limits the amount of local press coverage. It limits minority and female ownership and also has all sorts of other negative effects on the media. And they claim to know nothing about these reports, except the problem there, Jeff, was that they commissioned them. So
unreal.
Yeah, that was an unreal moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah, this is outrageous. Well, I think it's really great that you're there, that you're being included, to show you the kind of journalist that you are. You've been in the firefights, covering protests, covering a lot of different issues, and you deserve to be on the panel this evening. Let me tell you this. There's been a lot of protests lately against the Kavanaugh confirmation in Seattle, that's for sure. I want to keep up with all of them. I want to get to you on that, because is this the intensity, and particularly by women, is this bigger than what you have seen, going back to 2000 with the was it WTO or one of those things with the whole Starbucks and so forth, and overall in some of the protests that have been in Seattle? How do you differ this one from the previous ones that you have covered?
Well, the largest protest recently in Seattle was the Women's March. The last two have been, upwards of 100,000 people. So you're talking that's like anti-Vietnam War era days or civil rights era days, the March on Washington numbers, and also the WTO protests. The protests that have been happening lately have been spontaneous because they've been based upon what's happening in Washington, D.C. So when the vote happened, at least a half dozen different groups hit the streets, and some local political representatives, women, were out there. I know Pramila Jayapal has been a part of some of these rallies, and other local women in the city council and other local representatives from the Democratic Party, but also a lot of members of the tribal councils and a lot of Native women have been speaking out and leading of the protests. So
interesting.
I think it's a big thing, and I thought it was the most interesting thing about it was that as a journalist, I'm covering these marches to the federal building and things, and they're going on all over town, and I'm realizing I'm looking at the crowd, and I'm maybe of 1% of the crowd were actually male. These were definitely women marches. I mean, and they're very angry women and very outspoken, and I think people are saying, and I've seen the same thing with some of the tweets from Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren and others. I think it's actually galvanizing the movement. And if there's anything, and I was telling a friend earlier today who was thinking about moving to Seattle, I said, if there's anything that I can tell you is that, the politics on this side of the mountains in the state anyway is leaning more and more towards a progressive and even democratic socialist sort of trend. And that's where everybody's moving. And it's happening faster than I expected. I knew that there was a big movement towards the progressive side of things during the Bernie Sanders campaign. But since Trump has become president, it's more like a landslide. So,
yeah, well, that goes without saying. Obviously, he's sped it up, and somebody said he's actually good for Democratic business. But is it that are the women more now buying into the Bernie Sanders thought processes of, single payer health care, buying into 4 years of free public university, or are they just sort of going along because they want allies?
No, the true progressives, the Sarah Smiths, who is a lot like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and is one of her confidants. They hung out together at the brand new Congress conference. I believe that was in Tennessee. But she is all on that. She is saying, number one, Medicare for all. Okay, simple, single payer healthcare. Number two, free college education. Number three, get the corrupt money out of politics. I mean, that's it. And she's keeping to a very simple platform with just a few key points, and they are resonating, I think, with pretty much all the other progressives and democratic socialists within and outside of the Democratic Party right now who are just, who really want to take on that issue. There are people in the Democratic Party in Washington State that want to take on that issue, and they want to potentially, if they can win back enough of the state legislature, make Washington the first state that actually introduces Medicare for all. So there you go.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Mark, we'll see what happens. Good luck tonight, my friend. We will talk to you next Tuesday. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Jeff.
I want to thank our great producer, Jason, for producing this broadcast with help from, of course, our great callers and listeners and so forth that send me a lot of great information. We thank you for listening and supporting the Jeff Santos Show. Keep on fighting, folks. My name is Jeff Santos, and it's my time to say that's right, my time to say I gotta go.
You're listening to 1590 WSMN Nashua.
USA Radio News. The International Monetary Fund is downgrading its outlook for the world economy and also America's. Here's USA Radio Network's Chris Barnes with the details.
Citing rising interest rates and growing tensions over trade, the IMF says the global economy will grow at 3.7% this year, the same as in 2017, but down from the 3.9% that it was forecasting for 2018 in July. The IMF expects the U.S. economy to grow at 2.9% this year, the fastest pace since 2005, and unchanged from its July forecast, but now it's predicting U.S. growth will slow to 2.5% next year, year as the effect of recent tax cuts wears off and what it calls the Trump trade war with China takes its toll. For USA Radio News, I'm Chris Barnes.
Former New York Democratic Congressman Anthony Weiner is scheduled to be released from prison May of 2019. This is 3 months shy of him serving his full 21-month sentence. You're listening to USA Radio News. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley stepped down today. Now, she will be around until the first of the year to help with the transition. She spoke earlier today at the White House.
I'm not leaving until the end of the year. My goal is that we make sure that everything is in good place and for the next ambassador to come in. But it's a great day in the United States.
For USA Radio News, I'm Tim Berg.
It's 8:05.
It's 71 degrees. Live from the palatial studios at Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston. This is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Now, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Jason. It's hour 2 of the Jeff Santos Show. Welcome to it. We are going to be talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield at the bottom of the hour at around 7:34. And in a couple of minutes, actually less than that, we'll talk to our good friend Melissa Tomlinson, the Barracuda of Badass Teachers, the best name in politics today. Of course, the Assistant Executive Director of Badass Teachers, mind you. A couple of things, folks. Tomorrow night, we're going to be, as you may just heard before we intro the show for the second hour, the gas worker situation, still very much a big local story here in Greater Boston, and of course, what's going on with the lockout statewide and into New Hampshire. We're going to talk with John Bonapane tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time about the last 14 weeks. And is there any progress on a lockout ending? As you also heard, the Department of Public Utilities under Baker finally woke up and basically slapped the hands and the wrist of the National Grid, telling them they better pay attention to public safety or there'll be some problems. It's the middle of a campaign season, so, we'll see what happens there. Secondly, of course, today is Red Sox-Yankees Game 4, and yours truly going to be glued to the TV tonight at 8 o'clock once we get off the air. So go Red Sox, to say the least. All right. Our next guest comes to us from the great state of New Jersey, where she has taken on Mr. Chris Christie and many other political non-leaders. They're not leaders, particularly if they're trying to destroy public education. And she is, of course, the Assistant Executive Director of the great Badass Teachers, known as BATS. And Melissa Tomlinson joins us in a regular time slot here every Tuesday, a Teacher Tuesday. Melissa, great to have you on. How are you today?
Good, Jeff. Doing good.
Excellent. All right, let's start the discussion with coming off the Kavanaugh defeat. And there are a lot of teachers who are women, and obviously there are men too. But I'm wondering, as a woman, when you saw Susan Collins, backed by two other senators, I think Ms. Caputo of West Virginia was one, given this sort of, press release by the Donald Trump administration and saying that Ford was mistaken and that there could have been another man, to me, disqualified her from almost any other sort of, way to deal with her going forward. I'm just wondering, though, as a woman, to see somebody be put up there, propped up there, and having to lie for her fellow men. Oh, he's a good guy, and it was a mistake, and, why are we doing this? Who leaked this information? I just think it's outrageous, but I would love to get your thoughts.
It's the moment we heard, to me, it was a moment of betrayal. As women, we tend to think of ourselves as a tribe, as sisterhood, always creating space for one another to feel safe. And she definitely betrayed that, especially in the time when we're fighting back against a male-dominated world that's become ever more so apparent to us since the 2016 elections.
So true.
So most of my friends on social media, myself included, immediately donated to campaigns and PACs against her. It disqualified her from a future in politics as far as women are concerned. And as we're finding out, and we will find out after this election, women's voice is only going to get stronger.
I agree. And as one of the thought process that I had is that this resignation today of Nikki Haley was to try to prop her up and give her potentially a VP point, whether it's Trump at the top or Pence at the top or whomever. It would not surprise me that is what it is, because the Republicans are hemorrhaging votes in the women's column. And, she may very well be somebody who is willing to say anything and do anything to get herself in the Klieg lights of the vice presidency. That's how I think. They would never, of course, elect her, as much as she would be a puppet anyways for the Republicans, but they don't elect women. It just doesn't happen. So that's where that is. I also think, now that Kavanaugh is Supreme Court justice, do you feel that some of the folks that you communicate with on social media and other networks that you are part of, are they going to sort of give up on the idea of impeachment, or is this something in the back of the mind of electing Democrats, presumably in the fall, and looking at the Democrats and pushing the Democrats to look to impeach him? Or is it going to be more on the issue side, and they're going to try to do everything in their power to keep Roe v. Wade from being destroyed, to keep from other issues, including educational issues? Where do you think a lot of women and a lot of educational women will go?
It's kind of a 2-point line of attack, right? First, you want to do the easiest path towards your goals, and the easiest path would be to put the people in Congress that will, fight back and maintain Roe v. Wade and, fight the DeVos agenda, definitely. So that's first, but impeachment is secondary, and that is there in the background. In my mind, it's almost as a backup. It's not something to be discounted, but there are quicker options first.
And do you think that locally, going after DeVos, state by state, is that one of the areas that you guys will be focused on?
That's definitely one of the areas we're focusing on. She doesn't make any qualms about her agenda to expand vouchers, to expand charter schools. We just had, I'm trying to remember what state it was, but there was a state that was just granted like $10 million to expand the charter school system. Her takeover and continue almost pilfering of the student loan programs. It's devastating, especially when we're working so hard to get our students to a point where they're ready for college. We give them every access that we can. We try to make, we're fighting at the state level to make community colleges either free tuition or affordable tuition, grants and scholarships. We're fighting for those things in the local and the state level. So then to turn around on a federal level and, any kind of extra loans that they may have to take to have that program turn around and take advantage of these students at a vulnerable time in their life is, we have to continue our fight just beyond the K-12 sphere. No
doubt. We're talking with our good friend Melissa Tomlinson here on the Jeff Santos Show. Again, if you want to email me, it's jeff@revolutionboston.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. We'll gladly, of course, pass it along to our good friend Melissa. The DeVos family comes from Michigan. I'm not sure if that's the state you're talking about, but that to me is a state that has been destroyed. The public schools have been destroyed. As you well know, the Michigan Flint River crisis, people dying left and right. The person who oversaw that, of course, they took away the elected officials in Flint, made the Lake Huron water, which was one of the purest in the country, to the Flint River. People died. People were chemically imbalanced and a whole slew of things. They were eating lead and drinking lead and so forth. At the same time, that person was then moved into the Detroit school system. And, of course, this has been going on for a couple of years now, which, I have to think DeVos has her hands in this, along with the Governor Snyder and the guy, I think it's Schuette, who is the Republican nominee that thankfully the Democrats are ahead, but, it's still within 10 points. What are your take on that state in Michigan, since that's where sort of DeVos and her family still have a big sway on the politics in Lansing, the state capital?
Michigan is very important, just because if you look at the events that we've been dealing with in Flint specifically, but it's not just Flint. We have Detroit, whose school system has been decimated, other areas. The callous disregard for human life. It speaks to overall what their agenda is for the future. When you look at what actually happens with the lead in the water, people, kind of get the idea that, people are sick now, they don't have access, and they still don't have access to healthy water. But the chemical imbalance that lead causes is harmful for up to 2 generations after somebody is affected by lead. So then if somebody who is affected by lead has children, and then those children have children, it's an exponential factor that causes the population in that state to have issues. And a lot of those issues manifest themselves in the classroom. So then you'll have extra special education costs and extra services needed for the children. So that kind of roundabout way destroys the public education system.
No, I mean, it is a scenario where they have money, the DeVos family, including the brother who is a foreign policy hawk and, is responsible, Mr. Prince, I believe his name is, for some of the atrocities during the Iraq War. So this is something to keep an eye on, folks, and one of the reasons why Ms. Whitmer is a very, very important part of the November midterms, getting her to be the next governor of Michigan, because you cannot afford to have another Republican governor there who would basically be another puppet for the DeVos family to that point. Another element of this is, where state houses are. How focused is Badass Teachers, Melissa, on trying to win back, Senate, state Senate, and Assembly and state House across the country? Because nobody talks about this. All the attention's on the Senate or some congressional races, but the local, the more important you can be, and state houses across the country are overwhelmingly Republican, and the Democrats have a chance in a number of states, including Michigan, to take one of the 2 houses. What is the goals for Badass Teachers when it comes to local state reps? I know you've been involved in New York with Zephyr Teach Out when she was running and so forth. What is what's the game plan over the next month?
So all of our state kind of chapters are loosely affiliated, and they've been doing their own endorsements to kind of bring attention to these races. Specifically, like you said, Zephyr Teach Out in New York New York Bats have endorsed her and are campaigning for her and canvassing and such. New Jersey, we're working on electing Andy Kim to replace Tom MacArthur, specifically for his Trump-like views and his attitude on health care and public education. It's not only, so you can take over, one of the houses, but you also have to be concerned about the governor's races. Because
Sure.
in a lot of the states, the governor has the final say and has the vetoing power on whatever may pass the House or the Senate. So we've been extremely laser focused in Ohio on that governor's race. Ohio Bats have endorsed Richard Cordray for his education views. Ohio underwent the ECOT scandal, which is the Electronic Classrooms of Tomorrow, which is a corporation that still technically owes the state $60 million. And Mike DeWine was peripherally involved with that corporation. In the past, he had accepted campaign contributions. Once the scandal broke, he donated that money to charity, and he did eventually file charges against ECOT, but it was through an extreme campaign that Bats and the unions worked on together to bring light what ECOT was doing to the state. We're also keeping an eye, of course, on Georgia with Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp. Arizona's another big key state, especially since the Arizona Educators United Red for Ed movement. They've gotten behind Garcia, who is definitely against vouchers, also because specifically they have Proposition 305 on the ballot, which would seek to expand vouchers, so they're pushing for a no vote on that. Florida is another state that has been decimated, their education system, not only with the funding and with the charter schools, but also with teacher salaries and the unions. The unions were given a couple heavy blows with decertification laws. So Gillum is our favorite, Florida Bats favorite there. They actually just voted to endorse him. And he wants to give a $1 billion increase to the state corporate income tax, which I find interesting. It's what Phil Murphy tried to do in New Jersey, and because the House and the Senate pushed back against it under Senator Sweeney's direction, that was reduced, but we did get a little bit of an increase, hopefully to be more in the future. And, of course, Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin was decimated with Act 10 for the union. Tony Evers, it was a teacher. He was a principal. He was a superintendent. He was the public school chief recently. So he definitely has a good sense of what education needs, definitely for early childhood, child care, respect for the profession. But, more importantly, than just, the different candidates. If you look overall across the nation, and what really kind of gives me hope is the fact that we're seeing education platforms, and we're not just seeing, some for school funding or, I want to help the teachers. We're seeing specific plans being outlined. Some of those plans outlining things that we've been asking for, wraparound mental health services, dental for the students in one state, community schools. The issues we've been pushing for the past 5 years are being talked about more and more. When you look at Georgia race, people are saying that the education issues are second only to healthcare in the state. So education's making that forefront in the conversation when it comes to who you're electing as your candidates. And that's a big bonus.
Well, that is great. And, of course, you mentioned a lot of states that have been gerrymandered. So you're exactly right in the sense that even if you were to win, some of these state houses, you're not going to win them all. But the governor has the right of the pencil. He's got the biggest, she got the biggest vote, the biggest pencil, I guess you could say, to redistrict these things. So, that would mean a lot, in Georgia and Florida and Ohio, in Michigan, where Republicans control one of the two houses, if not both of them, and they have controlled all the governors, too. There's a Republican governor in Florida, a Republican governor in Georgia, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, et cetera. And there's 30 of them, I believe, or close to it. So, yeah, I think you're spot on, and I'm glad that Bat is going after that. And shout out to the Ohio Bats, who always great to me on Twitter, at Jeff Santos Show. The fact is that I think it's really important for the American people to sort of connect the dots of education at the local level, in their community, in their neighborhood, to a national issue, or at least a state issue. And I think those are things that's great. So I think the Bats have deserve a lot of credit, because for a long time education was sort of put in the corner. It was put in the corner, and now people are bringing it up. And I think the fact that you had in Detroit, the same person who destroyed the water in Flint was given the job of the Detroit Public Schools, which destroyed them and led to a lot of teachers striking and walkouts and so forth, and even some folks going on hunger strikes there in Motor City. So I think it's really important, and I think it's great that you guys connect the dots, because, look, I mean, in my opinion, I've said this before, teachers are the most important profession in America, and without it flourishing, the future dries up, and we see how, non-competitive we are around the world, and, of course, along with the education is healthcare. And those are the nurses and the doctors that are always out there too. So they go hand in hand, and they should be number 1 and 2 in everybody's life, because it's really, what your life is about. If you have good health and you have a good job, which you get with a good education, you're pretty much set, for a chance at a comfortable life, even though we have the Republican Party to sort of make things more problematic for you. Final question, Melissa. Do we sense that people are now going to be more tuned in on November 6th, going to be more likely to vote because of the Kavanaugh outcome this past weekend?
I do. The amount of even just get out the vote and voter registration drives that I'm seeing put on, in my local area and in other states, it has increased. And a lot of these are specifically and have been specifically for the past couple months driven by women. Right? We have a group in South Jersey we call South Jersey Women for Progressive Change, and they've mobilized people across the state to, attend campaign events, to canvass in the streets, to do voter registration, to basically get out the vote. Even when you look at social media, everybody's sharing information about registration, when the last day to register is. They're sharing any news about any changes for mail-in voting and those deadlines. The overall push for awareness has just increased and increased.
No doubt. Hey, always great talking to you, Melissa. We'll talk to you next week, and hopefully as we get closer to the elections, we can really focus on a few states and where bats are focusing on. Thank you so much for spending time with us tonight.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Melissa Tomlinson right here on the Jeff Santos Show. Again, folks, we'll be taking the pulse of a number of states between now and Election Day, and Michigan may be on our list this week, and we may talk to our good friend Bernie Porn and Kurt Guyette, who basically was the investigative journalist from the ACLU that took this story to task. We're right back. It's a Jeff Santos Show. Mark Taylor-Canfield on deck.
Installing and repairing natural gas lines is no game. So why is National Grid gambling with public safety?
National Grid locked out more than 1,200 union workers to force concessions, even while profits soar. Now the company is betting on your safety with inexperienced replacement workers. So we've asked 90 cities to suspend National Grid projects.